Hey there, what's up? I wanted to come back and return to the subject of GitHub Copilot and the CLI and sweep up a couple shavings. One is something I forgot to mention, and that's about aliases. And the other is I realized with a little bit of horror that I might have unintentionally given some misinformation in my previous video on the service. So let me address that first. Here I am on my Windows 11 workstation. I have Windows Terminal up. I've installed the GitHub CLI. I've installed the GitHub Copilot extension, and I've authenticated to GitHub. But let's say I want to check my token. Now, right now, I'm pausing, and you can see that completion come up. Now, that is something I ran earlier today. In my previous video, I assumed that that was GitHub Copilot, but of course, that's a chicken and an egg issue. First of all, I don't think I had even lit up the service yet, and I was getting. So I just wanted to clarify. I don't know with 100% certainty which engine or extension is giving me these particular interactive completions. They're obviously all coming from my command history. So I'm thinking it's either something with Windows Terminal, possibly with PowerShell. Okay, so now that I've crossed that off the list, let me show you. I'm going to use the right arrow, and I'm going to ask GitHub Copilot for a suggestion. And my suggestion is gh command to verify my GitHub token. How can I verify that I'm successfully signed in to GitHub? I mean, in one hand, Copilot's not going to be able to give you a response unless you're signed in, but just roll with me here, will you? Here we have that text menu that I taught you about in that previous video, and I love the type to filter. We have to, again, remember the 3 types of commands. And also, I'm going to give you some guidance that occurred to me in the last 24 hours that don't approach prompting with the GitHub Copilot and the CLI the way that you do in GitHub Copilot chat, let's say. This CLI integration is much more special purpose, so I've found that you want to be thinking from the start either about a shell command. It could be, I'm thinking bash, PowerShell, winbatch, and then gh would be the GitHub Copilot, and git is the git CLI. I'm going to do gh, and I could just type gh, enter. And there's what we need. And now, again, we could copy command to clipboard, explain, execute, revise, rate, or exit. I'm going to do exe to execute. And when we hit that, I face planted a little bit in my previous video explaining this. So here we go, cutting to the chase. I went to execute the gh auth status, and my expected result would be the result of actually running that command. But notice that instead the command was copied to my clipboard, and this text says, without using the ghcs alias or -s shellout flag, the suggested command will be copied to your clipboard, which I love that as a safer default, because now I can Control V, enter, to actually run the command, you see? But I want to talk about these aliases, what's going on with those. There's 2 aliases. You know, probably if you spent time with Copilot, if I do --help, that there are not many commands as of this recording in summer 2024. Config, which is where you can set defaults. Explain, that's where you might have something in your command buffer or that you want to throw at the service, or a command that you've received from elsewhere, etc. And then suggest is where you're prompting for a new generation, a new completion, a new command in this context. So if I do a GitHub, or not GitHub, gh-copilot alias -h, let's take a look at what's happening here. Let me scroll up to where it starts. These aliases and functions are not required to use GitHub Copilot, but they can be useful for convenience as it's a key shortener. So essentially, what you've got with gh-copilot alias is you can run these scripts that the GitHub contributors, the GitHub Copilot for CLI contributors evidently created for a given shell environment. And it will create aliases that wrap gh-copilot suggest, that would be ghcs, and GitHub gh-copilot explain. So you might think, or I might think, let me just tell you my frank thoughts, I can think of many different ways where I could do a simple text expansion. So that doesn't sound particularly helpful. I use auto hotkey, for example, and we could do a very similar deal there. So, I mean, I don't want you to think that aliases are some amazing, huge feature. It's a little convenience shim. And you can look at the code. Let me actually show you that. Let me clear the screen and go gh-copilot alias and just run that command. And when we do it that way, it says which shell to generate aliases for. We've got 2 Linux Mac OS type shells. And we've got, I'm on a Windows machine, so of course I can either text filter P enter or arrow down enter. And it echoes. Now, I'm not sure if it actually ran it. That's where my knowledge with the alias has run out. I haven't tracked down debugging, well, other than it echoes it. And what I'd like to invite you to do is maybe you can pipe this output into a text file. Take a look at it, and you'll see that it's just a couple advanced PowerShell functions that are going to not only alias or just do a simple text expansion, but there's error handling. There's some really nice quality of life stuff in here as well. You can light up the debug stream to see your API calls, for example. So at the end of the story is you can run GHCE and then your prompt, and it will pass through these gates, these parameter and gates and process gates and clean gates. And there you have it. There's really nothing more to it than that, actually. Okay, let me see. Is there anything else that I can think of with gh-copilot? Let's go to the help screen one final time and see if there's anything else at this point that we might have missed. Well, remember when I said that I'm learning that prompting here at the CLI requires a vastly different approach to prompting than doing it in a scripting language, or, just prompting in general, Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, when you're doing it in that context. So let's maybe dig into an example there. How about we do a gh-copilot suggest, and in this case, it'll be a git command. And see, again, here is my terminal completion, which is coming from the PowerShell terminal extension, maybe, but I'm almost positive, if 99% positive, that is not GitHub Copilot in the CLI. Because I'd mentioned in the previous lesson that that would be a big issue. Unless the tool asked you to opt in immediately, I would not consent to GitHub Copilot reading my command buffer, in a shell. No way. I don't like that. I mean, if I agree to it, that's one thing. So let's think of a git command just off the top of the old head here. Git command to... normally I can think of examples right off the top of my head. And now here's the spotlight on, and I'm half tempted to pause the recorder. No, I won't do that. I'll say, give me a git command to show J users commits from 9 to 11 a.m. Central Daylight on June 27th, 2024. I don't know. Maybe that's a Mickey Mouse example. I press enter and we get the completion character down there. It's like, okay, what are you going to do now? I forgot to close. I use double quotes when I pass into GH. So it's asking, is this just confirming? Generic, this is a git command. So I type git, enter. And there we go. Now let's take a look. Since, until, all right, date local. So it solved my time zone issue, assuming I'm local time zone. Now, there I would actually wonder, did GitHub Copilot know my local time? That I do on my Windows system clock, it is Central Daylight. I'm guessing that that's just an inference of the AI, though. Now, here's the point. When we come to revising, this was a surprise I saw when I recorded the previous lesson here. Let me go to revise command. And when I do that, there's not a real indication of what I need to do here. And in the previous demo, I used double quotes. Now I'm not going to do it. I'm going to say, how should this be? Change user to Y person. And let's see if it understood that. No, it's going off in a very different direction there. Kaiser Sose, huh? Even a pop culture reference. Well, it looks like we're early days indeed here, particularly the revise experience. If there do happen to be any GitHub Copilot for CLI engineers watching this video, would you please, I'm sure other customers have surfaced the feedback here, and I'm willing to help for sure, but revise, I'm not sure what it means. And just providing a free text prompt did not suit the bill there. So I Control-C to break out. I'll clear the screen and we'll call this lesson done. Thanks a lot.